Welcome back to Patchworked Podcast. I'm your host, Lisbeth Palmer, and today with me is my friend, Liz Clarke. We met in Costa Rica on a group trip with a bunch of strangers, which, like, thinking about that, I'm always like, oh my gosh, we did that. That was kind of crazy. I love that we did that, and I love the people that we met. And I would just love for you to kind of talk about yourself, where you are currently, and just like what you're doing with your life right now.
Oh, I love that question. What am I doing with my life? Oh, I don't know. Well, hello everyone. I'm Liz Clarke, and I'm actually stepping fully into my multifaceted era. So I do a lot of things. I am, let's say, by trade, an HR leader. So I've been in HR for over 10 years at this point, but I also really enjoy creating content. So I will go ahead and say that I am also a content creator, and I also like to write. So I'll say that I am a writer, and I'm also a life and leadership coach. I do ClickUp consulting. I'm dabbling in all of the things right now. This is definitely my multifaceted era.
I did not know about the ClickUp thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's a road I want to go down right now, because I don't know if it'll make the most interesting podcast.
We can go down it later.
But I love a good system. You are currently, I mean, you're doing a lot of things. You just started your own podcast. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that and why you decided to do that now?
Yeah. So technically I'd say this was like a reboot of my old podcast. So I actually first started in content creation, if we go all the way back, in 2020, and I started a YouTube channel. So that was my first introduction into like creating content. I had always loved seeing creators like Halise, for instance, who led the trip to Costa Rica. I'd always loved seeing content creators, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun to create content just for fun? And also during that time, we were in the middle of the Panini Press, so I was in between jobs as well. So I was like, I need something else to do with my time other than looking for work. And so that YouTube became a wonderful creative outlet for me. And through that, that's where I started to come into contact with the idea of starting your own business and doing that on the side. So that also led me to creating even more types of content on Instagram. I would create posts on there and also still do my YouTube channel. But then I decided to dabble with a podcast because I really loved podcasts. Like, I love content in general, but I also really love that intimate feeling of listening to just someone just being in your ear and talking about just interesting topics. So I really enjoyed that as well, and thought, well, why not? Life is short. Let's try something new, something fresh. There's nothing like trying out a new medium to also kind of do a pivot as well with it. So I really appreciated that sort of fresh start, that clean slate. And through there, it was interesting because I really enjoy YouTube. I feel pretty comfortable on YouTube and showing up and talking on camera. But I also felt a different level of comfort with podcasting as well. So it was nice. It was different, but it was also very, I just really enjoyed how different it felt and the intimate feeling of it. And I could really feel like I was like talking to a friend, like just talking to someone that I knew. YouTube, it's, you can definitely get to that place, but for me personally, it still felt a little bit different because you are kind of on with the camera on watching you.
Yeah.
So I dabbled in podcasting, and I had a few episodes, but then I ended up, I was taking on a lot, and I reached a point where I was like, okay, maybe it's time to press pause on a few things, reassess, recalibrate. So I took a break for a while and really spent a lot of time focusing on my work in HR. And then fast forward to this year, I actually got laid off from my job in January. And that's when I decided, you know what? Like, let's do another recalibration here. Like, what really would feel fulfilling for me right now as I'm reassessing like how I want to show up in the world and the things I want to do, as I'm getting super clear on the things that I stand for and will not stand for, and where I really felt like I could make impact. So
Mm.
I had discovered by following actually other people on LinkedIn who had Substacks. That's how I found out that Substack was even a thing. And that I created I created a Substack. And that's, to me, mainly it seems more like a blogging type platform. But you can also add podcasts to it. And so that's how I sort of refreshed and reinvigorated my dormant podcast, but just did it on Substack. And my first episode for the year was really about, how I wanted to approach 2025 and just things that I was thinking about and how I wanted to make sure I was stepping into this year fully in my truth and doing that more this year than really ever before. And in the moment, honestly, it felt like the best way that I could articulate that, or how I wanted to in the moment, was through podcast. So that's how that started up again. So I'm dabbling in all the things. So I could end up creating, like, I've done a few blog articles actually on the Substack, because that's just, I kind of felt like called to write out my thoughts.
Yeah.
But I could go back to doing a podcast episode or blasting out a YouTube video. It's just kind of in the moment, wherever the vibe takes me is where I'm at.
Dang. There's nothing like a whole big life change to really, I mean, it shakes things up in so many ways, but creatively it can really get things going. And I love a life change that helps you like prioritize more what you want. I'm curious, like, with your background in HR, how much of that is tying into it? Like, how good are you at boundaries and helping other people understand their boundaries? Because that's what I think of when I think of HR, and it feels like a very big need for us in the world right now. Yeah. What do you think about that HR stuff, like playing into your creative journey and what you want to share with other people?
Yeah. It's interesting because when I had first gotten into HR many, many years ago, I said to myself, this is the best place where I can be, where I can really make impact, because this is where you're taking care of the people. Like, if people are going to spend the majority of their lives like in a job, they oftentimes spend more time at work in any given week or day than they do with their families. So that place needs to be a space where people feel safe, where they feel heard, where someone's advocating for them. And when it comes to, and it's interesting when it comes to boundaries, because it's like, on one hand, through my work in HR, I feel like the point is to advocate for employees. I know some will argue that it's also to take care of the business. And yes, on some level, but the employee should always come before the business, in my opinion. And
you're so radical.
It's hard, right? It's hard to right. It's hard to like. It's like, when you think about boundaries, even in like a work setting, for instance, you underestimate how much of an inside job it is. Like, even though we have employment laws, for now anyways, we have employment laws, we have, generally employers who, want to do right by their employees. And so they try to create benefits or other ways to make sure that, they're doing what they can. At the end of the day, the way that the employment system is set up, it's set up in a way that, as an employee, like, you don't get to have boundaries. It's set up in a way where the employer gets to take And those are the rules of the game that you have to follow. And so when you think about boundaries, you have to be, honestly, I see more now at this stage of the game where it's like you have to really take care of yourself in many ways, because at the end of the day, even like HR professionals are still employees of a company. Like there's really only so much that they can do. So you have to be able to like know at the end of the day what you are willing to take, what you are not willing to take, and go into it clear-headed, also understanding like the consequences, because that's something that I think people don't often talk about as much as they probably could or should when it comes to boundaries. It's like there will be consequences to upholding your boundaries. And whether you are comfortable accepting those consequences or figuring out what's next after those consequences, is going to be up to every individual person. But it's like you have to be willing to like put teeth behind your boundaries. Otherwise, they just get walked all over. If you try to set up a rule for yourself where you're going to stop checking emails after, say, 6:00, that's your done time. If your manager comes in with some new fire that they need your help with right now, like you have to ask yourself, like, what am I going to do in that moment? Like, are you going to say yes, or are you going to hold firm to your boundaries? And it depends on the person, depends on the situation, but you really have to like acknowledge and see your own power, and then make the decision that is true to you.
Yeah. I don't even think it's definitely true for people who are employed, but even as a self-employed person, I'm like, oh, I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, lucky me. Don't have to answer to a manager. And then I'm like, wait, I have terrible boundaries. Who am I to judge anyone? But it makes me think a lot about, a great book I've been listening to that you recommended called The Dance of Anger. And literally I listen to it when I'm like taking a walk or something. And as I'm listening, she'll say something and out loud, I'll be like, oh, because I'm like, it's such a beautiful way of presenting things. And also like, I feel called out in a lot of ways. And now I wish I had written down some specific examples. I think I just need to get a hard copy of the book. When you first read that, like, what were your big messages that you received from it?
Yeah, that book was a game changer. It was, and it's funny because when I got it, originally I was hesitating a little bit because I never really thought of myself as an angry person. Like, definitely there were times where like coworkers would do the most and aggravate me, but it didn't really feel like I had like a consistent anger problem, quote unquote, so. But I'm glad that I decided to kind of just take a chance on this book, because when I started to read it, I realized, oh, wait, I am actually very angry. I'm consistently angry, but I handle it in a way where I'm just telling myself that I'm just kind of dealing with this. Or it's like, oh, this is just a situation that I have to deal with in this way. I'm trapped in this. Like, what else am I going to do? I have to take care of this thing or do this extra step, because if I don't, then so-and-so is going to respond in this way. Or, they're not going to appreciate it. They're not going to recognize me. And I don't want to have to deal with, what they're going to say or how they're going to act. And when you're like avoiding those things, like you are participating in like your own, you're a participant in like the anger that you're creating and letting fester within yourself. And that was like the biggest thing for me. It was like, oh, this anger, because I'm not dealing with this in a different way, it's festering inside of me, and in these
Mm.
different ways. So it's not like, oh, I'm angry, I'm gonna go fight somebody. It's like, oh, I'm angry and I'm gonna put in another hour of work because like I don't know what else to do with this energy. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to turn it into working and doing something. Like, I'm a Capricorn. Everything just gets automatically turned into what can I go work on?
That's
It's just
hilarious.
not, it's not healthy. It's not
Mm.
fun. So yeah, that book really, that was like the biggest, one of the biggest aha moments for me, for that was really seeing how, by choosing to avoid conflict because I didn't want to have to deal with the other person's reaction, that was still me dealing with my anger in an unhelpful way.
Mm.
And the second big thing that was incredibly helpful for me, I'd say maybe even a bigger thing than the first one, is the idea of the, I think she calls it the change back, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, when you basically you basically state your boundary, you uphold it, the other person's going to react to that.
Yeah.
And not necessarily because they're a terrible evil villain, but it's because you've changed your steps to this dance that you've had, the usual. So they don't really know how to respond. So they're going to keep trying to respond in the way that they've always been responding because they don't know how to react. You've
Mm.
just changed the steps of the
Mm-hmm.
dance
Mm-hmm.
mid dance. So
Yeah.
that was really that was really eye opening for me, because it helped me to not feel so resentful of the response. I was like,
Yeah.
oh no, this response actually makes sense. And my job isn't to try and defend what it is that I need and my boundaries. My job is to just accept that this is what I need and these are my boundaries, and you're allowed to feel how you feel about them.
Yeah.
So that one was a huge one for me, because I think that, and especially as an HR person, it's like you're given every tactic in the book about how to deal with conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if when conflict arises, you know the I statements, you know the ways to try and de-escalate the situation, but what you're not prepared for is like someone else's reaction to you doing things the quote unquote right way. It's like, I use the I strategy in the right way to tell you what I need, and you're still coming at me. It's
Oh
like,
yeah.
you're still not behaving how you should behave because I did this strategy in the right way. And it's like, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the point. Whether
No.
you do the strategy in the right way or the wrong way, it doesn't matter. Like, you need to like fully accept and own what it is that you need, instead of feeling like you need to defend what it is that you need. Because when you
Mm.
feel like you have to defend it, that's when you get even more angry. And when you're like, oh, this, like, I can't talk to this person, like, dealing with conflict just makes me, so stressed out. It's because you're now then going to war about to prove that what you need is okay, to
Right.
convince the other person that what you need is okay, when that's not your job.
Yeah.
Like, you can't change the other person at all. Like, your job is actually just to accept that this is just what you need,
Mm.
and that's it.
Mm.
That was so eye-opening for me. Yeah.
I love that. Dang. There's so many things that I was thinking as you were talking, and I was like, I'm trying to order them up in my head. But I mean, I feel like anger has such a big stigma around it. I grew up
Mm.
pretty religious, and that was like one of the sins. It's like a thing that you have to avoid doing it. You have to avoid being angry, even though there's like lots of times in the Bible where God was angry about stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm like, wait, why can't I also be allowed to be angry? But anyway, I feel because I was not able to express anger in a healthy way growing up, or it was like considered sinful, I just like turned it back into my own body. So I have a
Mm.
physiological response when I'm angry. I like get shaky and my voice gets shaky and I'm like, I have to run away. So anyway, I have really enjoyed listening to this and thinking about like, oh, maybe my anger is like a roadmap for what I need, like you were saying, and
Mm.
not just something that's there, but something that shows me like what is the next step that I need to take to advocate for myself. And so I've just loved this thing so much. Also, the whole idea of like, whoa, sometimes we use anger by like blowing up about something to maintain a pattern that we want to be in because we're afraid of breaking out of that pattern and
Oh.
doing something different and better. And I was like, oh no, oh no. Like, what are the relationships in my life where it's served me to be angry about something so that I don't have to break out of that pattern and see something that could be better, but maybe different or scary or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know where to go
Eye-opening.
from there. It was so good. If you haven't read Dance of Anger, do yourself a favor. Please get it. Maybe I
Please
need
do.
affiliate
Yes.
links for the two of us. Dance of Anger,
Mm-hmm.
if you're listening to this right now, I forgot her name. If you want to be a partner
Dr.
to the
Harriet
podcast,
Lerner.
Dr. Harriet Lerner, if you want to be
Mm-hmm.
a friend of the podcast, please get in touch. Um, yeah, it's so interesting to me to see. I think it feels like mental health and all of this is like coming to the forefront of conversations, at least in the spheres that I happen to interact with. Maybe this isn't true everywhere, but people are like starting to learn these things about themselves and applying it to their work and their family lives and all of that. So I'm so curious to see like where it takes us as a society. Like, can we become a little bit more self-aware collectively? I don't know, maybe we're about to go backwards, but or maybe this is a chance for people to like realize, whoa, we really need to do something different. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think this definitely is a collective time of like eyes opening and people really thinking differently about how they're participating in capitalism
mm,
in this system and just really seeing all the ways that it just doesn't serve us.
yeah.
I like even in me in my personal life, I've been really kind of taking stock of all the different ways that I am sort of reacting to things in my life versus responding to things in my life. Um, so it's like it goes beyond even just like when someone does something that I feel is like something that makes me angry. Like now it's really taking a closer look at even like my spending habits. It's like like in how many different ways am I just reacting to something that is being sold to me, and
Mm,
everything's being sold to you at every second of the day in capitalism. But it's like really asking myself, like, why am I buying this thing? Do I
mm,
really need any more stuff? Like,
yeah.
it's like, like, and I'm hearing a lot more conversations around that now too, where it's like, like people are saying, I don't need more stuff. Why am I buying all of this? Like, really just taking a step back to look at these things and think, is this really, how I want to be spending my time, my energy, my resources? Like I really need to get more intentional about like the life that I'm building for myself
Mm,
and for the future too. So I think that definitely at a collective level, many people are asking themselves this question. Um, and also I think it's important for people to remember that you also have to address it's always going to be an inside job. So
mm,
like even if you're, deciding to not buy anything ever again and just make everything from scratch,
oh,
like make sure that you're also addressing like what part of you internally is actually attracted to those things to begin with. It's like
mm,
what part of you is gets that comfort from taking out that credit card and buying whatever you want whenever you want, or what part of you gets that that sweet gratification from scrolling social media or whatever.
mm-hmm,
It's like we often demonize the thing but
Right.
it's bigger than the thing. It because you could swap it out with something else and you'd still be doing the same thing, reacting to something or giving your time, energy, and resources to something that you actually don't intentionally want to like do that. So it's, I encourage everyone, and it's a journey. Like, I started my journey of like first learning about coaching to then like getting training about coaching and getting coaching. Like, I started that 5 years ago, and I'm still uncovering so much about myself in the process. So it definitely is a lifelong journey. So, I would encourage folks to, make sure that as you're looking at the external, also make sure you're paying attention to the internal as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of motivation for corporations and for capitalism to keep us facing outward and to keep us individualistic.
Mhm.
And I follow some people who are American expats living in Germany. They talk about how in German education, there's a whole section of propaganda, because I think the Germans are like, we don't want to repeat our mistakes. So they look at examples of propaganda in US culture and just like, oh,
Oh.
yeah, this is what we want to avoid, or this is how we can recognize when we see it in the media. Um,
Mm.
and even thinking about things like in other places in the world, it's not legal to have um, commercials about drugs, like
Mm.
just just all of the stuff that we kind of take for granted as things to expect here. And in other places, another example I thought was interesting. A woman who lives in Europe was talking about like, yeah, I don't have central AC. I have other ways of like cooling down my house, and I also have healthcare. Like, there are things that we're given in our culture that we're like, oh, this means I'm rich. Like, I have a phone or I have a car on credit. Um, and who knows if I can pay for my next doctor's visit, but I have these other
Yeah.
things. So it's like this perceived wealth to keep us complacent. And that really gets my goat. And I don't know what to
Mm.
do about it,
Mm.
but I'm mad about it. All right, Dr. Harriet, what comes next? Who do I need to go have a conversation with? What are you doing in your own sphere of influence to like counteract all of these other things coming into your life, and to try to like live out these values of yours?
Mm. And so funny enough, I really do take like those principles from the dance of anger and apply it to these other things. Because after I read the book and I had finished applying it to like my work relationships and other relationships, and I was thinking, oh well, like, why can't I just apply this to also my relationship to circumstances?
Mm,
It's like, if something in the world is making me angry, and typically my dance with it would just be to like get really angry and frustrated and maybe just like shut down and not do anything,
mm,
or like vent to a close friend.
mm-hmm,
None of that.
mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but it's just my usual way of interacting with it. Like, what would be different instead if I first, became aware of the fact that I was feeling angry, that something pissed me off, but then took that time to focus inward and get clear on what exactly about that pissed me off. Like, what exactly about this does not align with my internal value system? And then when I get clear on that, then taking the next step to ask myself, okay, so if I actually wanted to do something or make a change that would be in alignment with my internal value system, then what would I do? Like, what would that look like?
Mm,
And so for me, sometimes it looks like creating content. Or maybe sometimes it looks like doing the same thing I would have done before, but from a different internal place. And so then instead of that activity feeling exhausting at the end, it feels energizing. So, like venting to a friend for an hour instead of leaving me feeling depleted and powerless and defeated still, it instead like the conversation goes in a direction that makes me feel like, you know what? There's not a lot that we can change here, but there are things that we can change. And so maybe that sends me in a completely different direction. So, it's definitely not easy to do, but like when you can get to this place of like really listening to like those emotions that don't feel too nice, that don't feel too good, when you listen to them and actually figure out what it is they're trying to tell you, then you can do something different. And that's where you're stepping into that responding energy versus that reacting energy and reclaiming your power. And at the individual level, it's like, yeah, it's not going to happen for the collective overnight, but if more and more people start doing this at the individual level, start sharing this with other people, like over time, this stuff spreads. And then over time, you get to even larger change, like like the spread of an infectious disease. Like it just takes a few people, but they just touching everybody and stuff spreads. But like, yeah, why couldn't this also happen with like good helpful ideas and change?
Yeah.
So that does keep me hopeful, but we have to do our individual part first, and that's really the only thing we can change, but it does something. I like to think.
Yeah. There's a lot of uncomfortable emotions that go into even starting that process, and I think for a lot of people, myself included, having that discomfort that you have to initially get over is such a barrier, but it is worth it, because I think on the other side of feeling those things and not dissociating and not just scrolling to social media is when you can really find your purpose and find things that bring you joy. And I saw something yesterday about joy being a form of resistance, like the way that the powers that be are like putting out overwhelming amounts of information and changing things. Like all of this stuff is made to help to make us feel depressed and hopeless and like, well, we can't do anything, so we might as well just comply and move on with our lives. But choosing to like live fully in your life and be joyful and to take those uncomfortable emotions and sit with them, like you're saying, is like the best way that we can make sure we're not becoming sheep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really hard to do that too. I love just distracting myself, and I have to actively pull myself out of those distractions and remember, like, okay, wait, right here, like out in the world is actually life. I want to stay in my curated life in my screen. But yeah, I think that's just gonna self-perpetuate into more and more of an echo chamber that doesn't fulfill me and do anything good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The first step's definitely the hardest. And I think too that like self-compassion is key here. Like even just making the intention to want to do this more and to be better at it is so huge. Like that first step is so huge. And then over time, maybe you take another baby step and then another baby step over time. Because what you want to also be mindful of is like putting that pressure on yourself to hurry up and be healed. Like we don't like that's the same issue, but just in wearing a different coat. So it's like having space for our humanity is such a key part of the process.
I want to be better now.
Right. I want to be healed now.
Oh, no quick fixes for me. That's a bummer.
Yeah.
Do you have a creative practice that you're engaging in? Or is it more like go with whatever comes to you at whatever time it comes to you?
I'd say that typically it's when I'm feeling inspired in the moment, that's what I run with. But oftentimes too, so when I'm starting to kind of like expand my idea of creativity as well, away from like not just creating content, but even just like getting my thoughts out onto the page. So journaling, I journal all the time. Like I will fill a notebook like it's
Ooh,
my job.
yeah.
But it's like the act of like thought dumping. It's like your brain is creating all of these thoughts. I think it's something like what's the statistic, like anywhere from like 80,000 thoughts a day or something wild like that. So it's like you're in a constant state of creation through your thoughts. So like when I give voice to my thoughts and just dump them out on the page, like that to me, like creates like almost the same like nourishing effect as creating something. Um I think like when I'm actually creating something, I definitely get the full benefits of like being in flow, but also um some of that additional satisfaction layer. So it's a little bit different, but even something just as simple as just like getting my thoughts out on the page and not judging them,
Mm,
it's a nice step in that direction. So it's not like all or nothing. Like either I am creating a full podcast episode or nothing. It's like, no, actually in this moment what would be really helpful for me is to like create on this page by thought dumping everything that's coming to mind right now. And then from there, like I can see clarity. I can maybe some ideas will come after that point. So, yeah, that to me has been like my steady Eddie for years now, journaling.
do you have prompts that you give yourself, or you can just go? You can just
I
go
can
for
just
it.
go. When I
Raw.
first started, I
Yeah.
did have prompts when I first
Mm,
started. But at this point, I'm just like whatever's coming to mind is what's coming to mind. And I'll usually start with something as simple as like, I'm feeling kind of meh today. And it's just like, I don't even know the emotion. I just know the sound. It's like, meh. So I just write meh on the page, and that's enough to just like get it all out.
mm,
But in the beginning, like if you're just starting out, prompts are super helpful. Like there's like a journal app I have on my phone that just came with the iPhone version I have. It's literally called Journal. Like it'll give you prompts and you can just use it for free. It's as like a helpful start. Um, Even now too, so I also like I have gotten really interested in like tarot as well. So like I'll
mm.
pull a card and maybe that will trigger me to kind of start writing. So it honestly doesn't at this point I can use almost anything as a prompt or like nothing. But when I first started, yeah, having like questions to think about can be really helpful. Mhm.
Yeah. Tarot is one of my favorite ways to do like deep work journaling because I tend to be very much like, let me report what I did today. And that's literally, I have journals from when I was a little kid, and it's all the same thing. Like, today I went to such and so said blah, blah, blah. Um, and there was like, and I literally remember when I was younger, I would specifically leave out certain things because I was like, oh, I don't want to remember that this thing happened or that I had these feelings about this person or whatever.
Mhm.
And so now that I'm like, oh, I see it, it's a very valuable tool. And I sit down to like write, and my brain's just this white noise. Um, and so when I see people who have like a consistent journaling practice, I'm like, it feels like magic to me.
Mm.
But the tarot stuff, I mean, I just, I love that. And I want to know how, when did you get into the cards?
So it's funny, interesting story. So I also grew up very religious,
Mm.
super religious. So
Which
I was
flavor?
definitely the type that would look at this and be like,
Oh yeah.
that's demonic, I'm not touching that.
Mm-hmm.
Just full on judgy Capricorn in it. And then I like, as I started to I like in 2020, actually before 2020, I think more like 2018, I had gotten divorced. And like through that journey, I really started taking a closer look at my relationship with religion
Mm.
and kind of going through my own like deconstruction journey. And that's when I started really kind of questioning things and just wanting to like, just feeling like I needed more out of like spirituality. Like if
Mm-hmm.
God was so big, like I need more. So I started um so in the spaces that I started finding in like 2020 with everything happening in the world, finding more spaces with like other women of color and like listening to like their spiritual practices as well and getting exposed to these different things, that's when I also met people who were like in this like spiritual space and into tarot, and they started talking about like their journey with it. And so eventually in 2023, I think someone that I had known from one of those spaces was starting a tarot study.
Mm.
And for some reason, I just felt so called to it. Like I didn't even have to think about it. Like as soon as I saw the post, I was like, bot. Like, let's go. I'm in this workshop. But I did it like with a bit of fear still, because I still had that internal like conditioning of like, this is bad, like you're gonna go to hell, this is of the devil, like all that internal stuff. And then as I slowly started like through that practice, like learning about like the history of it, learning like also like how like the suppressing of tarot and other things were also connected to the suppressing of like the voices of female leaders, especially in the early church movement. I It really opened my eyes to like, oh wow, like this idea that you can seek God essentially
Mm-hmm.
within you, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to go to this male um figure to hear,
Yeah.
from spirit. It
Mm.
was like it was like the wool had finally just been pulled from my eyes, where I was just like, oh my gosh, like of course they would demonize this. Like it's all about power. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
it's it's just so like that's a whole nother episode in and of itself, like me talking about how I feel about organized religion at this point. But like it just really like opened my eyes to just like how much had been hidden from me, I'd
Mm.
say. And
Yeah.
and just over time, honestly, I didn't it kind of snuck up on me how long I had been using these cards. And like, apologies to my mom if she ever listens to this podcast episode, because I know she'd have so much to say. But it's just like like eventually over time, like I really just, it became so intuitive to use them and to like connect with like the messages. But
Mm.
also like sometimes, like I don't know if you find this, but when I like tarot is like it'll kind of come for your neck sometimes. Like
Yes.
it'll like you'll pull
Oh
a
my
card
gosh.
and then it's like, I didn't want to deal with this today, but I guess I am.
So
Like
rude.
yeah, it's like that coach that's like, so I know you think you cool over there chilling doing this thing that you're doing, but what you actually hiding from
Yeah.
today? And
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh my God. So I appreciate that aspect of like kind of like not being stuck in not having a practice that consistently keeps you in this like comfort zone, this
Mm-hmm.
space of just like I'm fine and I'm checking off all these boxes, which was very much my experience with religion. I know it's not everyone's experience, it was just mine.
Sure.
Um so yeah, it's just over time, it just became really natural and really intuitive, and I still continue to learn so much about it. I also started reading this book called Mary Magdalene Revealed, and
Mm.
like just learning even more about like different aspects of like Christianity and the creation of the Bible, that just where there was just active suppression of like female leaders in the early Christian church. So
Mm-hmm.
it just opened my eyes to a lot of things. But yeah, I
Yeah.
like it, not to like, not to say that religion in and of itself is bad. Like that's not something I'm trying to say or want to get across at all.
Totally.
It's a tool, I think. And
Yes.
it's like what you use the tool for matters.
Mm-hmm.
How the tool makes you feel about yourself matters. Um so yeah.
Oh my gosh. Ooh, so many things to respond to. Okay. I have a friend who described trying to organize her brain as like shuffling cards, and sometimes she just drops the cards and she has to like stack them back, and I'm like, oh, this feels right for my brain too. But so I grew up in South Carolina, which is pretty Bible Belt, and so same kind of thing. I remembered the other day, my family stopped shopping at Piggly Wiggly because they started selling lottery tickets, and we were like, well, it's gambling, so no, thank you. Um, and so there's little things like that I just like remember, like, oh, this used to be a very big part of my life. Um, but one of my favorite things that I realized about tarot is like the way that I look at tarot cards is exactly how I used to use the Bible. Like I would I would be that person who would like say, "Okay, God, what's your message for me today?" And then like flip through my Bible and then see what I landed on, and then just read it and be like, "Oh, I wonder what God's trying to tell me through this." And it was a way of, I think, of connecting with my intuition through what I was reading.
Mm.
Like, and sometimes, yes, the cards are very spooky. Like they come up and you're like, "Excuse me, uh, what is this?" But I mean, I think a lot of the time, for me at least, it's just about uncovering things in my subconscious that I'm not necessarily gonna find another way. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a whole new beautiful world. And into like a woman's intuition, learning to trust that is such an incredible gift. So well done. Getting on that journey for yourself. Like I think there's a lot of ways in which structured religion, and I totally agree with you. Religion does a lot of good things for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But when you have it structured so much that it doesn't leave any space for intuition or questioning or
Yeah.
interpretation, you end up with a fascist society. And like there's just so many issues that come out of it, and yeah, I'm worried for where we are currently. But um we all just need a little bit more. Well, a woman's intuition, male intuition, I guess, is its own thing. Masculine intuition, I don't know. I'm sure that there's a lot of men who have great intuition who have suppressed it because they're not allowed to feel things. Um, they're not allowed to listen to their feelings, so they're like, I'm just gonna listen to my boss and keep living my life. And so I think we're all kind of missing out on that aspect of ourselves that is so valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it patriarchy. Listen, what it's done to men is just it's terrible because it's like as like if you're a man, not to speak for men, I'm not one. I don't know that experience,
No,
but it's like in
please, let's
talking to my
do it.
husband, right?
Let's speak for
But
men.
in like talking to my husband and talking about like his experience, it's like I couldn't imagine like living and only being able to express like one emotion.
Right.
It's like if you're a man, the only thing you can do is just get angry. Like that
Right.
is
They're
it.
allowed
Because
to
like
feel angry.
if you cry, then you're not a
Mm-hmm.
man. If you're
Mm-hmm.
too happy, you're not a man.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much pressure,
Yeah.
and it creates this system where if you have to suppress like all these aspects of yourself, then
Mm-hmm.
you're going to take it out somewhere, maybe on yourself, on another person, who knows. And that also contributes to just the chaos that we're experiencing
Mm-hmm.
today. Yeah, like we all could need use more practice and support, like getting to know our intuition, understanding that it's a thing. Like I growing up, I didn't really think it was a thing, and it was just like intuition. What? No. You mean the Holy Spirit? Like
Right.
it's like
It's a whole
it
separate
wasn't
entity.
you. Like
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
So
Oh
it's
my God.
you know getting used to like your intuition, being comfortable feeling your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Um like it's next level, but it's a part of this like human experience. Like we have to, like when we don't allow ourselves to do that, it's like you literally, that means you're spending your entire life, this one life you get to live, just only experiencing a small portion of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's awful. Sounds awful to me.
Yeah. And it's a lot of times not even the most interesting part of yourself because I feel like your intuition is so deep in there. It's like what makes you different. It's what allows you to have opinions that are just your own. And I guess that might be a good reason to squash it out of us. But it's, yeah. Do you see yourself, have you found yourself like going back to any of your religious roots, or do you find yourself drawn to it at all at this point, or are you kind of like, no thanks, not for now?
It's interesting that I wouldn't necessarily say I feel drawn to any of it, but in reading Mary Magdalene Revealed, it's interesting because through that breakdown, I can see connections to things in my past
Mm,
experiences or past practices, or like the members of my family who are still deeply religious, like
mm-hmm.
being able to pinpoint like, oh, this is what they're getting from it, and this is what I think it actually is. Like
Mm,
there, because it's interesting to see like some of the parallels, but then also to see where maybe some of the things that I was used to experiencing when I was practicing religion, like noticing when I'm pulling that into my current spiritual practices and being like, oh, I don't want to do that. So
mm,
it's like even something as simple as like you like pull a tarot card and you look at a message that you interpret as like, I need to be more of this, or I need to do less of this. And you're like, it, that act in and of itself is making you feel like you're not currently good enough in some way, shape, or form right now.
mm-hmm.
Like you need to be more healed in that direction, or you need to do less of this or that. But then understanding that, wait, no, like this isn't a judgment that's being placed on me. Like that's something that I pulled from religion, where it's like there's this external God who, if I don't check these boxes, I'm a problem and I need to fix it. Versus no, like there's no external judgment. The only judgment that's happening here is me judging myself. So maybe I actually need to think about that. Like, how would I actually interpret what I'm seeing here if
Mm,
it wasn't from this lens of I'm still not good enough, and
right.
instead was from a lens of like, this is an area that I get to explore if I choose to,
Mm-hmm.
and I get to explore it in a way that doesn't feel like I am betraying myself or feeling like I need to become another person.
Yeah.
So that process has been pretty fascinating because it's like, oh, you're still in there. Those old habits, you're still in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Judgmental thoughts. I mean, judging in general is just such a that is a very deeply embedded thing for the self-judgment is it's hard to break away from. Um but one of the things that I think, over the weekend I was thinking about some of the stuff that I actually miss from church life, and it's probably more to do with community. And I was like filming
Wow.
for like a women's retreat, basically filming an event, and just watching these women talk to each other, and they just like get together and talk about spirituality and their lives and their walks with God, and they pray for each other. And I was like, actually, that there's like some stuff there that was
Mm.
pretty cool. Like, ladies' Bible studies know how to live in community with each other. And until one of them is like, I don't know, lives in sin and doesn't repent from it. But
Or it's
that's a
like, I'll
different,
pray for you because I'm better than you and you need to get right.
yeah. You just like lovingly tell them how they should be living their life. Um,
Right.
but it's made me, it, I have some really wonderful friendships that I've been able to cultivate over the years that I'm very thankful for. But I'm like, man, we need, I don't know if it's like Bible study, but tarot study instead. Um, just like intentional community with other people who are maybe in similar spaces or similar areas of their lives or believe similar things. Just where you're like getting together on a regular basis and talking about those uncomfortable things, talking about like, wow, why do I feel angry when somebody does this kind of thing or somebody treats me like this? I guess it's kind of like group therapy, but maybe less formal. Um, yeah, I would love to see or create more communities like that, because I think we need it, especially now,
Yes.
especially if we're trying to like find joy and trying to be better humans like out in the world and not just in our phones.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
haven't figured out. I have to figure out how to brand it. But
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because my husband would say the same thing about how like the one thing he misses from his old church days was that sense of community. And it's interesting to me because I feel like I had a very different experience when it
mm,
came to community. Not that the people that I went to church with wouldn't try, but I think honestly, I didn't know how to be in community.
mm,
And I didn't know how to cultivate that for myself.
mm-hmm.
So that book you recommended, I think it was Super Communicators, or maybe
Oh
I
yeah,
heard it in
yeah.
your one of your previous podcast episodes. I started
Mm-hmm.
reading it and I was like, oh wow. Yeah, I was just been coming to terms with the fact that I just really did not know how to like actively cultivate community.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would like I feel like I've had best friends that I've had since like high school, which is really awesome and amazing. And shout out to them because I know that's not a super common thing. But it felt like it just kind of happened, you know? And
Yeah.
so then something that, and I'm an introvert. It may not seem like it. I know it didn't seem like that on the Costa Rica trip, but I am truly an introvert. It's like, it always felt like difficult
Mm,
to like actively cultivate a friendship. It's
yeah.
like, how do you do that? So in that book, it was so interesting and just so simple how I forgot the author's name, like was it Charles Duhigg, something like that?
Yeah,
You know,
that
how
sounds
he's
right.
explaining
Just
is like, you
speaking.
know, it's shared vulnerability. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, you talk to some, like you're talking to someone, understanding them as a person, and then you're reciprocating that with like something that you're sharing about yourself.
Yeah.
And what I love about it, because as an introvert, I hate small talk.
Yeah.
Oh, I would rather have my eyes clawed out than engage in small talk. I hate it. I hate it. I had to do it in HR all the time, and I hated
I
it.
bet.
But it's like it does not give me joy to try and figure out something to
Mm.
like talk about with
Mm-hmm.
someone. But like when you know how to just cut through the crap and just talk to them as a human to understand who they are and what they're doing or thinking or feeling as a human, and
Yeah.
then you can reciprocate with the same, oh, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's I feel like the only reason why I really understand it or was able to process something like that seems so simple is this on this level is because of my training as a coach. It's
Mm.
like because of my training as a coach, I was able to identify the difference between like having a surface level conversation versus a conversation when you're really talking about stuff that actually matters.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like now I understand how to get under there and then how to connect. And so I don't have to have these small talk conversations. Like I get to just have like really interesting conversations with people and it's not a chore anymore. Uh, so I would say that back then I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So and I have to wonder how many people now don't know how to do that either. Like they crave these spaces they crave community spaces, but they don't know how to break that layer and maybe like ditch the small talk and just be.
Yeah.
Or they don't know, or they're feeling just a little bit insecure about what they can actually bring to the table. It's like, I want to be in community, but am I interesting enough for someone else to want to be in community with me? Like so many different layers that go into this. So we definitely need it more. I know I've been craving it more, but also from this place, I recognize that I just didn't really feel like I had the tools to
Yeah.
get there. And like, why would I have those tools? Because it's not something that's prioritized in this capitalist machine. Like in school,
Mm-mm.
you're taught to get a job. Like it is how you get funneled into employment to feed a business.
Yeah.
Like they don't care if you have close connections with your peers. They just want to make sure that you can connect with them just enough to not be weird so that you can work with them and push
Right.
along the capitalist machine. Like
Right.
it's not vested in deep connection or
Mm.
mutually nourishing
Mm.
connection. It's like, especially as a Black woman, you learn how to play the game. You learn how to nod, how to smile, how to adjust the tone of your voice. Like, all these things, but does the other person across that table actually know who you are?
Yeah.
Do you even feel safe showing them who you are?
Yeah. Oh. Oh. First of all, you were correct on the author name, and your ability to just remember these people's names is great. Amazing. I'm always like, this book that is about this thing written by, I always blank out at the author, unless it's something that I've really like read multiple times. And anyway, see, I just shuffled my deck of cards by leading with that. But I was gonna say, so I'm married to an extreme introvert. He's a Enneagram 4. I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram. I feel
Yes,
like as
I am
an
a one.
HR person, you have to be familiar with all the personality things. But he's an Enneagram 4, and he tells me about this YouTube channel he enjoys called Charisma on Command. And they literally like break down the ways that particular people will like talk or just like make themselves more presentable. And he studies it. Sorry for calling you out in public, honey. but they talk about things like, if you want to, impress people, or if you want to make people feel heard, here are things you can do. And I, as an extrovert, I think some of those things probably come to me naturally, but I don't know if it's my personality or my upbringing. I have just a huge discomfort with other people feeling uncomfortable. So my tendency has always been to try to fill the silence, or to just keep going until something happens. Like, it's like if you're a fan of The Office, like Michael Scott, he's like, I'm just going to keep talking until something happens. And I literally find myself doing that all the time. And And one of the reasons I wanted to do a podcast, besides the fact that I just like talking to people, is to exercise some of these conversational muscles, because I think sometimes I communicate really well, but I think other times I'm like, I'm going to try to fill silence. I'm going to try to, I will end my sentences on so, and I noticed myself do it a couple of times earlier, and I was like, oh, I did it again. But just, yeah, I want other people to feel so comfortable that I will over communicate just to like try to assuage their feelings, even though that's not my job. I take it on as my job, and I will chameleon to make them feel more comfortable. And I think being a chameleon is like both a superpower, but it also is like, oh, who am I really? So I think I learned very early on how to do that, but to the detriment of my own self-identity. So it's like there's two sides to this coin of community. You can like be so much in community that is your whole identity, or you can be like so much outside of community that is also your identity. And as I'm raising a child, I'm like, whoa, where is the middle ground here? Like, how do I teach him to both be a good human in community with other people, and also to know himself and be able to say, I am this kind of person, and so I'm not going to put up with your bullshit, because this is what I believe and this is what I stand for. It's yeah, it's crazy how it all ties together. And I'm Michael Scotting again. I'm going to take a pause. Try and be self-aware in the moment.
No, you're doing a fantastic job.
I identify with Michael Scott. I'm watching back through the Office Superfans episodes, and it makes me uncomfortable how often I identify with Michael Scott.
Oh man, my husband has banned me from like rewatching The Office because I might have rewatched it like 5 times. Not gonna lie. It's such good comfort food.
It is. And I'm listening to the Office Ladies podcast, which if you haven't, I highly recommend.
I've heard of it. I definitely need to give it a listen.
It's really fun, and it's from a creator perspective. It's fun to listen to the behind the scenes stuff, and like, why did they make certain decisions? Why did they choose this conversation? Why is this scene in deleted scenes and not in the final thing? So I'm sure as a writer as well, it would be, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
Yeah.
It's on the list.
Okay. Yeah. Office Ladies podcast. If you would like to be a friend of the pod, please get in touch. I think this is my second endorsement of the Office Ladies. I need to start building my affiliate links. But you are, so with the writing stuff, you are also writing a book currently. Is that still accurate?
Yes. Fiction. Horror.
Ooh.
Yes. In the works still, but taking my time with it. It'll probably be a few years at least before it's actually done, but it's been fun. It's been fun stretching my creative brain and just going with it, like ideas that pop up, or noticing it. Maybe like I make a note to myself, like, oh, you know, I want to fill in a gap here or there, or just kind of writing scenes as they come to me, but then having no idea how it's all going to connect. But then suddenly in the middle of the night, I'm like, oh, I know how that's gonna connect. Like, so it's been interesting, the creative journey. So I really do enjoy it.
I feel like, I mean, with your HR stuff, you have to be creative with people. Has that informed your other, like, more personal creativity journeys? Do you feel like your creativities like interconnect, or do they feel kind of separate from each other?
That's a good question. You know, I'm sure there are definitely elements that connect together. like I'd say, for instance, even like building my business, there are HR elements that I bring to that because it's like in order to build business, you need people. Like, so like if you work in the people function, it's like you're used to dealing with people. So even like some basic things where other people kind of have to learn it, I don't have to because I'm like, oh no, I did this for a decade. I know, like that just seems like common sense to me, but it's not really common sense. It's just because I've been doing it for a decade and it's muscle memory at this
Mm.
point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd be curious to see if there are other ways where like my experience with it's like being creative and solving problems in HR has also connected to um my creative writing process. I can definitely see where like my Capricorn structure comes into play cuz even so my husband also likes to write and write fiction as well. And he is I'd say I'm a much more linear thinker and he is more like big picture,
Mm.
like there's a mind map in there. So it's interesting to see how I approach the writing versus how he approaches writing, where I
Mm-hmm.
will write a scene and I'm like, that's all I got is a scene, where he will have like concepts and ideas and like, this is the idea, this is what's going to happen, da, 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 da. But like the detail of it, like he doesn't like, he like that's like the I'll figure out the detail later. And for me, I'm like, I gotta figure out the concepts later.
Do you ever go back and look at your earlier stuff? Like you mentioned starting a YouTube a while ago. Do you ever
Mm-hmm.
go back and watch your old videos and you're like, oh, I've changed so much? Or you're like, oh, wow, it's crazy how much is still the same after all these years?
I honestly I fought it for a while because I just remember how cringy I'd say I felt that my earlier videos were. And so I was just like, I don't need to watch that. And I was like, I won't delete it though, because I feel like it is, paying like it's like my it's my journey, it's my story, like
Mm.
it'll help someone to see the beginning to now, because I do that sometimes with people I really enjoy. I'm like, I'm curious, what did your first video look like, and I'll go back and look and I'll just be like, oh, I love this, but like right, like, but thinking about doing it for me, I'm like, oh, this is the worst thing in the world. But sometimes I have looked and I was like, oh, you know what, Liz, you was spitting back then. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Like,
awesome. I couldn't.
so that it's funny, like to see how some things are still constant. Like the
Mm-hmm.
tech gets a little bit better over time, but like, there's a lot that's still just me
You
coming through,
figured some
which I
things
really
out.
appreciate. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I wanted so bad to be a vlogger when I was in high school. And so I
Mm-hmm.
have private vlogs, which to come back to the journaling thing, I mean, it was very much like, today I did this and this and this and this. And I'm like, you are just talking to the camera. You're not showing any of this stuff. You're not taking people out into your world. What what's the point? But we all learn and grow. And I love
Yes.
to see I love having
Mm-hmm.
a good before example for a transformation. Um Before I land this plane, are there any other things that you would like to talk about or promote or explore further?
Yeah. I would just say that if you take anything from all of this today, it's spend some time doing some internal work, getting clear on what it is that you want and your values. I think that one of the things that I did earlier this year that was really helpful for me was literally creating like I call it a guiding principles document.
Mm,
Literally in it, I wrote down, things that I want, things that are my non-negotiables
mm,
in life and also in like partnerships, work or not work,
ooh,
connecting that to my values and really thinking about like what I want my mission to be, here on this earth as of right now, like
yeah.
still getting to evolve, but like something about like having it in writing, like just this powerful like declaration of like who you are and what you want, and just like if you're coming across a decision or something where you're just uncertain or something doesn't feel right, like cross-referencing it with that document. It's like, this is why this does not feel right. Like, this is because this is what I need, such and such. Like, it's been really helpful for me, just to kind of get it clear and out onto the page. So I highly recommend that. And
I love that.
so if you want to connect with me, I am on Instagram at the other Liz Walker. And through there, you can connect to all my other things like my podcast, Substack, YouTube, all that good stuff. And I do offer life and leadership coaching and also like consulting as well, because we still live in this world and it's kind of hard to make time for the things that really light you up when you're kind of dealing with chaos. So ClickUp's one way I stay organized. So like, yeah, if you need consulting help with that, then I'm your girl.
Love that. Everybody needs an HR BFF.
Yes.
And I feel like you can really help people with just a lot of things. Just yeah.
Yes.
I have 3 last questions that are they can be rapid fire, but if they end up not being rapid fire, that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, what is something that you had to recently unlearn?
Ooh. I'd say, so the biggest thing recently, and I kind of touched upon this earlier, was just like responding versus reacting.
Mm.
And then really looking at that in every aspect of my life. Most recently, finances, like really being more conscious and intentional about where I put my money.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
What is your hottest take?
Ooh, my hottest take. Well, I don't know if it's really a hot take at this point, but honestly, your employer is not your friend. It ain't loyal. So consider alternative options as well. Yes.
And then the last question, what is something in this past week that made you really happy?
Oh, so, okay. So I play this VR workout game called Supernatural, and it's like you can do a lot of things in it, but my go-to right now is kind of like the shadow boxing. So you punch targets that come at you and they play like awesome music, like all the stuff you hear on the radio and all that. And this week I like scored my highest points ever and did like 3,000 consecutive hits without missing. And that made me feel like a badass. So
Okay.
I will own it.
Are you punching things?
Yeah, like like targets. So it's all virtual reality, so it's not like physical or anything, but like targets that fly towards you, and so I punch them. You can they also have like this kind of lightsaber version where you can hit the targets with lightsabers. That's also awesome. They also have like stretching and meditation and all that stuff, but like there's just something about like putting like just hitting 3,000 targets like Kendrick Lamar tracks. It's the best. Also, and you do it in like cool places. So places all around the world, like you could be like hitting targets at like the pyramids of Giza or like on the Great Wall. It's really cool, and it looks really good. So
yeah,
yes, I highly recommend. And also, I think I only pay like $100 a year for it or something like that. So it's honestly the only gym membership that I've ever been consistent with.
That's funny. When you said Supernatural, I assumed you were going to be punching like fairy beings or magical creatures. But that sounds pretty awesome to you. Being able to see the scenery. It feels less violent if it's and not creatures.
Not punching people or things, just little balls, round balls
gremlins
that are flying towards you.
That's really cool. Oh, well, congrats on your 3,000 hit. That's awesome.
Thank you. I was feeling myself. I'm not gonna lie.
I would have been. Oh man, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm glad we got to talk more. I feel like we have so many patches in common to keep up with the metaphor of the patchwork quilt, but and you know, when you go on a group trip with a bunch of people, you get small moments of connection with individuals, but it's tough to go in deep with like one person. So I'm glad we got to talk more and just learn more about what we have in common, and I love to see what you're doing. And I can't wait to see where you go.
Thank you. Thank you. And you
Yeah.
too. I love the podcast.
Thank you. Well, now that you've been a guest.
And the music. The music's so good too.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm,
Oh, for those of you who don't know, I'm in a band and we did just release a song called Oil and Water, and we wrote it during COVID and it still feels very applicable today. So that's kind of sad, but also like yay for us, I guess. Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
that's all I got.
We multi-hyphenate in here.
We're so talented. I don't know how much of it for me. I mean, I think a lot of it is talent, but also I'm like, oh, I don't want to make money doing just one thing. I have to like have my fingers in multiple pies, because what if when the one thing goes south and I need this other thing to sustain me? But that's different conversation too. All right, I'm gonna just stop recording.